What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So there's something I need to kind of remedy and go over about a previous video that I did about using RTune for the PowerTRONIC ECU. So I know I said in a past video that you would utilize the map switch to basically load a different map for each side. So like right now, you can see we're in active map 1. Well, it comes to find out, it doesn't really actually matter. You don't have to be hooked up to the bike, and you don't actually have to use the map switch at all. And in fact, the way that I was trying to explain it is improper, and I want to give a shout out to PowerTRONIC themselves for reaching out to me and letting me know that there is actually a different way, and it's actually the only way that you can upload two separate map files from two different tunes onto your PowerTRONIC ECU. So I'm going to try to explain in this video how to use the map mixer and how this actually works. So right now we're looking at fuel 1 and ignition 1. So these are the fuel and ignition maps, the presets on here that are going to be commanding the ECU while the switch is in map 1 position. And over here, fuel 2 and ignition 2, these are the settings that are going to command when the switch is in map 2. What I did not know is that every PowerTRONIC tune, if you're only opening one file, has both of these settings already in it. So like my dyno tune, if I open it here and I click on it and I hit open, it's already loaded, so nothing's going to really change. If I look here at the fuel table for fuel 1 and fuel 2, everything is what the dyno tune commands. And if I come over here to configure, my RPM limiter is set to 10,500, which I'm going to change here in a little bit. So pretty much that commanded both the fuel 1, ignition 1, fuel 2, and ignition 2 to change to just the maps that are on the dyno tune. What I wanted to do previously was I wanted to compare map 1 of this dyno tune, so the ones that are under fuel 1 and ignition 1, and I wanted to compare it to map 2 of the PowerTRONIC tune. I wanted to see how similar or how different they felt. And because map 1 of the dyno tune is actually my favorite map, I don't really care to use map 2 that's on it. I favor map 1. It has a lot of good mid-range torque. So I also used to favor PowerTRONIC's map 2. So I thought that previously what I needed to do was hook up to the ECU and I would open the dyno tune. And I thought the dyno tune only had, just the fuel and ignition 1 in it, but it doesn't. It actually has two maps in one file. So follow along with me here. I know it can get confusing. Now the PowerTRONIC maps do the same thing. Both race map 1 and Race Plus Map 2 are in one file. And if you go on a PowerTRONIC's website and you download their ECU tune for exhausts, it has two files as well. The race map on map 1 and the Race Plus map on map 2. So it will change. If you only open that one file, it will put both maps on there at one time with one file. I thought they had to be two separate files. So basically the way that I've been doing it is wrong. Okay, now I'm going to show you how you can mix and match maps from different files. If I hit File, Open Multiple Files, it's going to open the map mixer. Okay, now right here I can click Select File. I'm going to choose the dyno tune right now. I'm going to open it. Now I like map 1 of the dyno tune. Okay, and you can see right here it says fuel and ignition 1 and fuel and ignition 2 and other settings. The other settings is for everything past that. Okay, so if I tell this to keep fuel 2 and ignition 2 the same and keep my other settings and leave them alone, all I want is my fuel and ignition tables from the dyno tune on here. I just have to select this right here. So I'm going to hit Mix and Load to RTune. Now, nothing on fuel 2 and ignition 2 changed because I told it to leave it alone. So I had just put that base map from PowerTRONIC on there, right? So that is still there. That is still map 2 from the base maps that comes on this ECU. Now, if I go over to fuel 1, you'll notice right here that this number is now a 10% increase. That 10% increase came from the dyno tune. And if I look at the ignition tables will have all changed over to the dyno tune. So right now, fuel 2 and ignition 2, this is map 2 from the base maps. Now, I'm going to use another example here, okay? Remember that right now, at 3,500 RPM, 6% fuel, on the dyno tune, we have a 10% increase. If I come over here to, let's say, ignition table 2, we'll look right around in this range. These are all 5s, okay? These are all 5% increases, basically from 4,000 or 3,500 RPM and up. It's pretty much a 5% increase across the board on the PowerTRONIC's map for fuel for ignition table 2. Now I'm going to go to open multiple files again. I'm going to select a file. Doesn't matter which one I choose, really. I'm going to select the dyno tune again. I'm going to tell it that I want to use current data. I want to keep fuel and ignition table 1 and leave it alone, and I want to leave my other settings alone as well. So now all I'm asking it to do is change fuel and ignition table 2, which should change to fuel and ignition table 2 of the dyno tune, right? I'm going to select load, and a couple of these just changed. So yeah, at 3,500 RPM, these are all 5s now. A little bit of ignition timing was increased. If I look at fuel, I can see a couple changes as well. So now fuel and ignition table number 2 is also map 2 of the dyno tune that I had. So I'm going to select open multiple files, and I am going to make this exactly what I want now. I'm going to select the dyno tune, and I want fuel and ignition table 1 from the dyno tune. That's my favorite map from that. I'm going to open another file, and I am going to select the KTM 390 exhaust tune without quick shifter. That's from their website. I'm going to hit open. I need to make sure that fuel and ignition 1 is selected from my dyno tune here, and that fuel and ignition 2 is also selected from the PowerTRONIC's exhaust map, because I'm going to compare the two. The other settings, I can choose to leave that alone and put it over here. I'm actually going to leave it on the other settings for PowerTRONIC's, because PowerTRONIC's has really good settings for a few things in here, including the increased RPM limiter. I'm going to hit mix and load. So our tables just changed. If I come to fuel 1 here, I can see that there is a 10% increase at 3,500 RPM. If this was nothing but PowerTRONIC's exhaust map, this would be a 0 down here. Theirs is very, it's very non-aggressive. Now, if I come over to fuel 2 and ignition 2, look at this. These used to all be 5s all the way across. On their exhaust map, they actually start increasing timing to 6% in the upper RPM range, pretty much almost all the way to redline. The only other thing I want to look at while I'm in here is I want to go to the configure tab, and I can see right here that the rev limiter is currently set to 12,000 RPM, because I used the settings from the PowerTRONIC map, and they like to increase the rev limiter to 12,000. I'm actually going to decrease that rev limiter to 11,000 RPM, and that's only because the dyno tune in general, it had a 10,500 RPM rev limiter anyways, and there's really, I never felt a need to rev the bike to 12,000 RPM in the first place. I mean, it's cool and all, but I'm going to drop that down, and then I'm going to leave traction control disabled. And at this point, all I need to do is hit send. That's going to send the data from all the ignition tables and all of this extra data over here. That's going to send it all to the ECU. I am then going to hit burn. Warning, changing this will make the changes permanent. I mean, it's not really permanent. You can change them whenever you want, but it's just saying that these will now be your maps no matter what you do until you come in here and change things again. So proceed. Data burning to ECU. I'm going to wait for that to give me a completed status. Burn to ECU successful. At this point, I can hit disconnect, plug the ECU back into my bike, take it out for a rip, and compare the maps. And if I ever want to do a comparison of any other thing, I can come in here and do that. Now, the one thing you have to keep in mind is, like how I said, I favor map 1 of the dyno tune. If I ever want to use map 2 of the dyno tune, I will have to have that take over fuel and ignition 2. The only way I can change that is if I copied the tables and then I transferred them over to fuel and ignition 1 and burned them that way. But that's super complicated and I don't really want to get into it. But what I'm saying is that say you like map 1 of the dyno tune and then you also like map 1 of PowerTRONIC's tune, you can't come in here and do it as simple as this, okay? Because when you hit open multiple files, say I open the dyno tune here and I open PowerTRONIC's map over here, I can't use fuel and ignition 1 twice. Do you see what I'm saying? I would have to take map 1 and copy it into like a separate file and make sure that those figures are under fuel 2 and ignition 2, and then I would have to come in here and do it that way. Like, you would have to work around it. So it really, this works if you like, you know, the fuel and ignition table 1 on one tune and you like 2 on another tune. It's super simple. But if you like both fuel and ignition 1 tables from 2 separate tunes, you won't be able to do it without changing the position on one of those tunes over to fuel ignition table 2. If that makes sense. So I know this is really confusing, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions in the comment section. You guys can also send me messages on Instagram through my DMs on there. I'm going to leave the link to my Instagram in the description below, so if you do have any questions, feel free to send those questions on there, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I'm usually pretty quick, unless I'm at work or I'm busy with something, so give me a little bit of time to answer you guys, and I'll try to walk you through this thing as best as I possibly can. Thank you for watching. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please hit that subscribe button now. Leave a like on the video. It really helps me out. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video.